Hey folks, this is the Core from Fighting Games Online, and I wanted to try something different this time for a video. This one basically, it's just kind of a tier list. I've been playing Fatal Fury, City of the Wolves, and just got me thinking about, all the fighting games that I've played over the years. And so I kind of wanted to just do this kind of like a series, starting with Street Fighter. Okay. So before I get started, just a few things that I'm gonna just a few disclaimers here. I'm not gonna add games that have multiple versions, so that won't be a part of the list because I haven't played every single version of every single game, so definitely not gonna put that in the list. And another thing is that if I haven't really put time into a certain game, I'm not gonna add that to the list either. So those are pretty much the disclaimers there. Okay, so we can just go ahead and get started with the first game, which is Street Fighter. And I'm gonna put it in the meh section. And obviously this was the beginning and it did lay some foundations for certain mechanics. But by that time I'd already played Street Fighter 2. So the graphics and the overall feel kind of left it to be kind of felt pretty awkward to me. They also only had 2 playable characters, which was basically just a sprite change. And it definitely was not the most balanced game for sure. I mean, just, the amount of damage that you could do in this game is kind of ridiculous in a lot of ways. So I should mention that there is a Mugen build that uses the same game. And it's definitely a lot more better. So I would check that out if you get a chance. Okay. It's called Street Fighter 1. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to Street Fighter 2. And for this one, I'm using the Street Fighter 2 Turbo. And that definitely is going into the legendary section here. It's obviously this kind of was the beginning of fighting games in a way. It laid so many foundations in terms of mechanics. When you're talking about different type of mechanics, from throw mechanics, from the combo system, character archetypes, command normals, Street Fighter 2 just had so much groundwork for fighting games moving forward that a lot of people followed, a lot of developers followed. So it has to get the legendary status in my opinion. And it's definitely one of the more popular games played on 5K, so I definitely have to go with that one. Other thing that I wanted to mention, that it's been said that it revived the arcade scene, which was pretty much on the brink of collapse. So it brought the arcade scene back in a big way. So definitely want to mention that as well. Okay. All right, let's go on to the next fighting game. And it's going to be Street Fighter Alpha, and I'm putting this one in the banger section. All right. And so this might be a hot take, but the new art style for this game was amazing. I watched the Street Fighter 2. Some people you might be familiar with the Street Fighter 2, the animated movie. And you can tell just how much an influence it had on the characters and the way that some of them interacted with each other. Even some of the, when you're playing the arcade mode, you have, a rival. This was like one of the things that they added in arcade mode. And so those things played out within Street Fighter Alpha. So yeah, definitely something that I really did enjoy about that game. I also enjoyed the Magic Series style of combos. This was at a time where I didn't really have a lot of knowledge about what links or chains were. So there was just, I just had no understanding of the systems at all. And I just kind of enjoyed it for what it was. The fact that you can just combo all your things into, combo all your punches into and make a combo and just do all that. I really did enjoy that. So they added Guy to the game, and his fighting game adaptation was very cool at the time to me. So I just, really, really did enjoy the game for what it was. Definitely I haven't gone back to play this game, but I definitely want to, because I felt like even though it was broken, it's fun. So I just definitely want to check it out at some point again. All right, so the next one is Street Fighter Alpha, and I'm going to go ahead and put that one into the banger section as well. I'm more so giving this one a banger as a consensus. I feel like, they went back to the basics with this one, and that made a lot of the fans a lot more happy about that. They basically took the combo system from the first game and created a custom combo system where you have the choice to either use custom combos or your super meter. And that's something I forgot to even mention about with Street Fighter Alpha, where they kind of introduced the 3-level meter system, which was definitely a cool thing at the time because you now got 3 different types of super moves. So that was cool at the time. I personally had the PlayStation 1 port known as Street Fighter Alpha 2 Go, which I enjoyed until it was unfortunately damaged. So definitely a favorite of mine looking back here. So next one here is Street Fighter Alpha 3, and I'm going to give this one a solid. This might be another hot take. I'm not quite sure people see Alpha 3 or Alpha 2 as the definitive version. Not really sure on that. At the time, it did feel kind of underwhelming when I first started playing the game. This introduced the ISM system, which lets you choose 3 different system mechanics. So it was kind of like giving you like a Street Fighter 2, like one had like kind of like a Street Fighter 2 original system mechanic type of thing, and then you had like the sort of like the first Alpha game sort of mechanics that were familiar to the first Alpha game, and then of course mechanics that were introduced in the second Alpha game. So that's kind of how they split it apart. Custom combo system returned, and it was known as the AISM, and it had a basic attack system which was sort of a precursor to what they did in Street Fighter V. Instead of getting rid of proximity normals, they basically turned them into command normals. So that was really an interesting take there. I remember Daigo saying that if they had not put the AISM into the game, that this game would have been perfect. So just something that I recall that I thought was kind of funny. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the next one here, which is Street Fighter 3, and I'm going to go ahead and put that into the legendary section. All right. Initially, when Street Fighter 3 released, it was pretty underwhelming. Only Ryu and Ken returned, so obviously fans were kind of disappointed that their favorites were not present. This was also around the time that 3D accelerated fighting games were gaining popularity, making them the center of attention as well. In a lot of ways, Third Strike was the end of an era, but in the present day, it's considered like at the pinnacle in terms of perfection when it comes to fighting games. So, it just has some of the best sprite work ever created in a 2D fighting game. The parrying system really made it one of the most technical fighters ever developed, and it is still one of the most played fighting games to this day. So, definitely deserves its legendary status. All right, on to the next one here, and I got Street Fighter EX2 Plus, and that I'm putting into the legendary section here. The Street Fighter EX series is probably one of the most underrated fighting games out there in my opinion. It was never the best looking in terms of graphics, but the gameplay was really top notch here. You could cancel supers into supers, which is something that no other fighting game was doing at the time, if I'm correct. There was an offensive guard breaking mechanic, which really kind of made it really exciting, kind of brought a different sort of strategy into the game. The new characters added to the series had some of the most quirkiest movesets I've ever seen. When I think of like Gullomania, just crazy characters that they came up with for that game. I feel like EX Plus 2 in particular was the best of the series, even though I've heard great things about Street Fighter EX3, and I do eventually want to play that one and maybe put it on tier list at some point. But yeah, that EX2 Plus really was my I consider it a favorite. EX2 Plus added like a similar system from Alpha 2 that worked like the custom combo mechanic, and I think that really made it something that created like a loyal player base, and so that it's still played to this day. So yeah, definitely one of the I feel like legendary games out there. All right, and next we're gonna go with the Street Fighter, Ultra Street Fighter 4, and I'm putting this one in the legendary as well. Not having a mainline Street Fighter game for 9 years, I think it really did something to fighting game fans. Street Fighter 4 it really came back with a vengeance in a way. It went above and beyond with single player content. It satisfied veterans who were looking for a challenge for the system, with the system mechanics. So that, definitely they ticked that box. It basically brought fighting games back from the void. There was, when you talk about like between, I guess what you say, like 1999 and 2008, that's looked on with the fighting game community as the dark ages. So basically this brought everything back. Most of the fighting games that had not been really being paid attention to as much, those kind of came back as well. So definitely brought a lot of fighting games back. All right, so let's go to the next one here. So we're gonna go with Street Fighter V next, and I'm gonna put Street Fighter V into a solid. The launch for Street Fighter V was abysmal to say the least. It was not the best launch, and everybody kind of knows this historically. I personally found it really hard to stay invested in this version, I found it hard to stay invested in this one for a lot of reasons. But yeah, I felt there were certain things that made sense to do at the time, but it just didn't seem to garner the same excitement as the previous game. I mean, I think part of that, of course, was just the fact that it was just lacking a lot of features and a lot of characters and all that. But, the actual system itself, a lot of people were just not happy with it. When it was all said and done, I think it's a solid game, but it definitely lacked the same magic that Street Fighter 4 was able to capture. So yeah, that's pretty much my feeling on that. All right, and we're going on to the final one here, and we're going with Street Fighter 6, and I think I'm gonna put this one into the banger section. All right, I feel like overall, my feelings on this game are pretty much still outstanding because it's really not what you would call like complete yet. It has to go through its different versions, before you can really say, okay, give it a real final, outcome in terms of rating. But for right now, I feel like banger is pretty good. It definitely had an amazing launch for a fighting game, probably one of the best launches, for a fighting game ever. It broke new ground with the single player content specifically, and I was completely blown away by what they did with it. Just being able to just run around and meet, definitely not something that I expected that they were going to do. So just out of left field with that one. The online play is probably the best I've ever experienced, using that, the rollback. They really did improve that rollback netcode. Definitely one of the best netcodes out there. The art style also is pretty top notch. When they used the new, they decided to go from before they were using the Unreal Engine, and they decided to go with their own in-house engine, and I think that really did help make the game look pretty good. So game looks fantastic. So there's no complaints there in terms of what they did with the characters. At the moment, I'm not that invested in the game as I, like initially I was playing it, but haven't really played it as much now. When I did try to get back into the game with some of the new characters, the new in-game currency kind of made that impossible for me in a way. I mean, I just kind of got turned off by it, and since then I have not, been back to play the game. I enjoyed it enough to me that I feel like it at least deserves that banger. So it deserves the banger rating, I believe. So the jury is still out at the end of the day, but we'll see where it goes. But for now, I think it's basically okay at banger. All right. So that's been pretty much the Street Fighter tier list that I have here. I do want to do other tier lists. If you enjoyed this content that I did today, please give the video a like. That will encourage me to move forward with some other tier lists here. I have the next tier list in mind. So if you like this one, make sure to give it a like, and I will consider continuing the series further. All right, I'm out. Have a good one.